We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. As for what we've been watching this week, I've been catching up, sort of partially rewatching the 5th season of Better Call Saul, because the 6th and final season is about to begin airing on the 18th, I think, is when the 6th and final season starts airing. So I'm reminding myself, because it's been almost 2 years since season 5 ended, because it was a long hiatus there. For, gosh, what could possibly be the reason there was a hiatus within the past 2 years?
I don't know.
Yeah.
No one knows.
There we go.
All I know is I've been going through Netflix and watching comedy, stand-up comedy lately, and if it was recorded before or at 20, if it was released in 2020, I'm not interested. I want only comedy that's going to at least somewhat address the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
If it doesn't at least somewhat address the pandemic, I'm not interested.
It is the before times, otherwise.
The before times that people are like, oh my God, everything sucks. How could it possibly get any worse? And I'm like, okay, so now you're not funny anymore, so I'm not listening to you. So what did we watch this week? I finished the first and maybe only season of, is it Cracow Monsters or something like that? I don't know.
I do not know. Okay.
It's a Polish TV show. I guess it's TV. I don't know. Sort of like Harry. Well, it's not really Harry Potter. It's adult, so there's a lot more nudity and stuff, but and cussing. But there's it's sort of like The Magicians, but set in Poland.
Okay.
Is that right? The Magicians? Is that the name of that show?
There was The Magicians. Yeah. That was a show.
But it's darker, and I found it interesting simply because there was clearly a lot of drawing on of old sayings and wives' tales and past religions and religious beliefs that were local to Poland, which I was completely oblivious about. Sure, so I found it to be interesting because I cannot believe my phone is ringing.
Yeah, that's what happens. We start the podcast.
Well, I forgot to turn it off. I forgot this time, and the last time, every other time I turn it off, it doesn't ring. It doesn't. And I can't close the door or get up or anything because I got the dogs in here.
Nobody ever hears it anay.
I hope not. It's very annoying. But anyways, so that was, I would say, okay. I would not say it was fantastic, but it was okay. I also watched The Bubble, which is a Netflix thing, which is like they were trying to film a admittedly B-looking movie during the pandemic, and they had people in the bubble and stuff like that. And it had... it had a lot of stars in it. Like it had a lot of people that you will recognize from other things, and it was fine. It was funny. It was light or whatever.
You will have to look up every comedian who ever made a special prior to the pandemic and message them on Twitter and say, why didn't you talk about the pandemic? I don't know how dates work, and you should have mentioned it in your special from 2018. I mean,
why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? 2014 even.
That's right.
So, I've been watching a little bit of comedy, just trying to lighten up my life a little bit. But, I feel like we did watch a movie this weekend, but I just don't remember what it is. It's been really crazy.
We've got a packed show, so.
Yeah. All right. Do we have anything up here to talk about? No. So let's just get into listeners of the week.
Well, don't we want to say what we are and how to get in touch with us? Because usually that comes
You're already here. Like, I don't understand why we keep doing this. Like, why do we keep doing this? Why do we keep talking about
Every once in a while, someone does
podcast?
Still say, I can't find your email address. I'm like, whoa, it's okay.
How do you even say that? How do you say that without having gone to some place where our email address is available? I mean, I'm not even joking. I'm like, you went to the website, you went to the Facebook, but you went someplace where the email address was available.
Although, to be fair, we often don't put it as a link because that just results in a huge amount of spam if it is an actual working link. So, okay.
It is true.
There's nothing to click. That's fair enough.
It's written out, though.
It is. Yep. And, videos have timestamps, so they're skipping over the intro.
Well, that's their own fault. I don't know what to tell you about that. I mean, you skipped. So what I do is I go back to the beginning and listen to the beginning, because usually people talk about what their podcast is about.
The beginning or the end.
That's right. AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you do is ask by emailing us a question at avrant.com or going to avrant.com, looking up any other way to contact us and asking for our email address, apparently. Question
that'll work too.
Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant, where you can see our live video recordings with at least my lips are out of sync. I don't know about Rob's. Maybe Rob's are perfectly in sync.
Mine's usually in sync because it's my recording on my computer, right. So that typically works.
Right. Yeah, that's probably what's happening, and not Rob trying to sabotage me in some way.
Hey, man, if you want to record it on your side and do all the YouTube uploads 1 week, I'm all for it.
No, I mean, we never had to start uploading it to YouTube. That was never a thing that we needed to do. We were just like, well, we're recording this.
It's Google Hangouts
doing it
fault.
anyways.
Google Hangouts used to automatically go to YouTube anyway. That's how it all started.
That's how. Why? Stupid Google kills things that we like.
They did.
You can contact Rob directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter's at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter's at avrant_Tom. All right. Let's thank our listeners of the week, finally.
Yes, let's shout.
Rob hates you, but I tried to thank you first. If you want to support the podcast in some way, one of the ways you can do that is by going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sending us a PayPal donation. So we want to thank Patrick for doing that this week. Thank you very, very much, Patrick.
Yes, indeed. PayPal.com is a place you can go to support us. Come to avrant.com and click on the Support AVRant link to take you over there. You do not need a PayPal account if you want to contribute that way. You can just use a credit card without a PayPal account. And Patrick, thank you for the financial support. Thank you for doing that. It's very much appreciated.
We do appreciate it. We also want to thank our 146 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service where you can sign up to be a monthly subscriber to our podcast. Every month, they'll take a little bit of money from you, however much you say, minimum of $1.
Yes.
And give most of it to us. So we want to thank our 146 patrons, including Dale. Dale, who says he also tries to use the affiliate links on AV Gadgets whenever possible. Thank you very much. And Bertrand. So thank you, Dale. Thank you, Bertrand. And thank you to the 144 other people who are over there at Patreon.
That's right. It's patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. And a big thank you to our 146 patrons, Dale and Bertrand. Thank you for being two of them.
We also want to thank Chris, because if you can't support us financially, just support us in some way and let us know that way, or do it to us. Sounded weird the way I said that. But anyways, do it, and then let us know. Or don't let us know, because we will have felt it as you did it to us.
Yep.
That's just the way I'm going to say that from now on. So Chris did it to me by sending me a code for Spider-Man No Way Home, which I immediately redeemed.
Oh, good.
And it is now available on my Vudu account, and we will be watching. The family is very excited.
Nice.
Because they asked me to buy it the other day, and I said, I'm not. It wasn't available. It was available from Amazon.com or whatever. Yeah, I wanted it the disc. So yes, we're going to enjoy that, and hopefully I'll talk about it next week.
Okay.
So thank you, Chris.
Oh yeah. I'll just say thank you, Chris, too. Even though it was for Tom.
It was for me. That's right. And we got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during whatever tragedy is going on this week, including from Keshaun, Dale, who found us on YouTube a few months ago. He quickly became a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, and he's working his way through our back catalog, watching 2, sometimes 3 episodes a day.
Yeah. I'm sorry, man.
I'm sorry.
I apologize. We didn't force it. So.
No, really. The double speed button.
Heck
Even though we talk kind of fast for that. But Bertrand said some thanks. Jack, who's a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club and used a secret word,
he did.
which is hard to find these days. And thanks to Tom for checking on the AV Gadgets favicon. He thanks me, I guess. I did check on it, and it probably still works. I don't know. There was another update this week. Joe and Gurninder, who says, a bummer that Amazon Prime in Canada has gone from $80 a year to $100 a year now, but it was bound to happen after the U.S. price bump, wasn't it? So, yes, it was.
Yeah.
So, Keshaun, Dale, Bertrand, Jack, Joe, and Gurninder, thank you for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. I'll say the names one more time. Keshaun, Dale, Bertrand, Jack, Joe, and Gurninder. Thank you all very much for the notes of gratitude to us for keeping this thing going. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
Got some news here. Plex wants to become a verb. Just Plex it. I really don't feel like that's going to go. I don't know. Maybe it will.
Maybe it will, because...
Anyways, they've introduced 3 new features that are shockingly functional and good.
Yeah.
The first is a universal search function. And this is far from a new idea, but unlike the implementation so far by the likes of Apple, Google, and Roku, since Plex isn't trying to take a cut in order to include competitors' apps, Plex's universal search actually appears to be pretty darn universal, and not just in the USA. Rob was super impressed by how comprehensive it is in Canada, showing results and linking to services he didn't even know about, and it will, it will also show results from your own local Plex library, as well as Plex's free catalog of movies and TV shows. Even better, you don't even have to have a Plex account to use it, let alone pay anything. You can just go to plex.tv and use the universal search right from their homepage. And of course, the search also works within any of their Plex apps on their platform. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to start using this.
Yeah.
Well, I
mean, particularly just searching on your computer or phone, because you don't even have to sign up for an account. You just go to the website. I will warn you, when you go to the website, if you just type in plex.tv, it'll probably ask you to sign in. Just leave the site and come back a second time, and usually that cookie has been there and recognizes that you haven't signed in, and it goes there. Also, for some reason, if you type plex.tv/, that usually gets past the wanting you to sign in part of it. If you don't put the / after TV, then it does. But in any case, you don't need to make an account even. And of course, if you have an account, it'll work.
So if you're using it within a Plex app and you're logged into your free or premium Plex account, you can select which services you subscribe to and only include those in your search. Clicking on whichever service you want takes you straight to that show within that other app most of the time, so maybe not 100%.
It's not 100% of the time. And for example, Crave in Canada doesn't seem to support that functionality, so it'll put you into the Crave app, but it won't take you right to the show on that particular app.
Surprised that would work with Netflix at all.
I know.
Considering that you have different accounts with
and Netflix. I mean, Netflix is the big one that does not work with anybody else's universal search. They won't work with Apple's or Roku's or Google's. I was quite surprised and pleased to see it working really, really well in Plex's universal search.
So the second new feature is a universal watch list. You can add movies and shows that aren't even out yet, and it will alert you when they're available.
Yeah.
And the last is the new Discovery tab. Again, not a new idea at all, but since Plex is actually bringing in data from, as far as we can tell, every service out there, it really is more useful and comprehensive. Because there's plenty of times I have gone online and said, just type in the movie name or the show name and then stream.
Yes.
And then it comes up and says, these are the places you can stream it. But it's rarely correct.
Exactly.
It's often outdated.
Yes.
And I will find that movie immediately on Hulu or something.
Sure.
I'm like, why didn't this show up? It said that you had to have a premium subscription or whatever,
right,
which usually means that it's on HBO or Cinemax or one of the other things that you sign into through Hulu. But
I was really, really impressed with what Plex has done. Because I mean, this it just started. So for a brand new feature, I was super impressed by it. Now, there is some room where they could make it even better. For example, it doesn't tell you what quality it's available in Plex's search. So if it's available in 2 or 3 different services and only one of them has it in Atmos and Dolby Vision or something like that, that information doesn't show up in Plex. Maybe they'll add a feature like that. Who knows? Like I say, this is the first generation of this. And then I came across 1 or 2 things that I did happen to know that show was available on a particular streaming app, and it didn't show up in the search, so I can't claim that this is 100% accurate. But compared to everybody else's universal search, I was super duper impressed by this and love it even more that you don't even have to sign up for anything if you don't want to. That's terrific. Right. So definitely check it out, plex.tv. I am happy to recommend everybody check it out, because what's the downside, to be honest, right? So yeah, that's great.
they hook you with the free, and then start charging.
Well, and I mean,
later.
they do have their own catalog of free streaming content. Plex has their own,
Right.
much like IMDb does, for example. So it will show you results from that too. So they're happy to show you that stuff. Or I'm not sure if they have any ads on anything. I haven't really used their free services, but the whole idea is they just want you to come to the Plex app first, right? You're on your device, you come to the Plex app first. Whatever you want to do, come to the Plex app first. That helps them. And I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of happy to do that, honestly. They have proven already immediately to be the most functional.
And they said they have a recommended, right? Discovery tab.
That's the Discovery tab. That's
Discovery
recommendations,
thing.
yeah. And across everything, across all the services.
So I heard that Netflix is going to start having double thumbs up instead of just
That's
one.
right.
First of all, I stopped using the rating system on Netflix the minute, and we complained about this in the podcast, however many decades ago it was that Netflix got rid of this, where they used to have the star ratings, and the star ratings really helped me lock down what I would watch and what I wouldn't. So they got rid of it because too many people were using it. So now it's just thumbs up or thumbs down. I stopped using it completely, but if they just go back to 2 thumbs and then maybe 3 thumbs and then maybe 5 thumbs, then we're right back to where I needed to be. So I would like to have more recommendations for things. I mean, for the first time this weekend, I tried the Surprise Me thing on Netflix, which is, of course, took me straight to the Bubble movie, which was a Netflix specific movie, which they claim is the most popular thing on their service right now. I'm like, you didn't really surprise me because it wasn't really targeted at me. You just, this is what everybody gets who presses that button right now, which makes me never want to press the button again. So anything that can actually show me based on my watch history. Right. I know people are like, I don't want to be tracked. Track me, please. Track me and let me know that there is another show out there like The Expanse, or another show out there like Moon Knight, or a lot of the Disney shows I watch. Let me know there's other things out there like that so I can watch them, or movies or that sort of thing. I don't really, most of the suggested for you stuff is just, these are things that are popular with people who live in Florida. Yeah. Now let me tell you about people who live in Florida and me. We don't exactly line up.
So naturally with the Plex stuff, if you want to use the Universal Watchlist or the Discover tab, you do need to have an account. That obviously makes sense. But you can have a Plex account for free. You don't have to pay for Plex Premium for this to work. So again, what's the downside, basically? If you're worried about them tracking you, create a dummy email account somewhere and sign up with that. So yeah, I am very much in favor of this.
I am. Just as a side note, if I sound hoarse, which I am, or if you hear me sniffling and or coughing, I'm blaming allergies. I'm not sick. I don't know what's wrong with me. I've just been just a little bit under the weather, so I might have a small cold or something, but I apologize in advance for any of those weird noises that you may be hearing. More news. YouTube and YouTube TV have some 5.1 audio now. Yeah. The regular YouTube app on Chromecast with Google TV, PS5, and Apple TV, as well as most 2021 and newer smart TVs, will let you hear 5.1 audio from YouTube's catalog of movies and TV shows, with support for more YouTube content and more devices coming soon.
Yes.
So there you go. No Xbox in there, so shocking.
I know.
YouTube TV on Samsung, LG, and Vizio TVs, as well as, for some reason, older Chromecast devices, but not Chromecast with Google TV, which means I can use my whole Chromecast if I want to. Those all support 5.1 audio, but they're testing 5.1 audio on Google TV, Android TV, and Roku. They're hoping that if everything runs smoothly, they'll add support on Apple TV, Fire TV, and game systems later. So apparently the PS5 is not a game system. Who knew?
And yeah, I mean, this is news. 5.1 audio, not Atmos. 5.1. But when it comes to YouTube, it's news. So it actually might get referenced in a future question. So threw that in there. And of course, we always rag on YouTube for that. So I figured it's only fair. Here it is. Some support. It's rolling out. Hooray.
I rarely notice it. I get stereo because of the way that the Xbox audio works, because it's so terrible. I get stereo here, and it's, I don't ever really notice unless I am lying on the floor in front of my speakers doing physical therapy exercises because my back's all jacked up. That's the only time I'm like, oh yeah, it's only coming out of the side speakers because I'm really close to one side speaker. But generally from my couch, it does, I get a good center image even without center channel being engaged. So it doesn't really bother me that much. But I understand people want to have 5.1 because it is,
yes,
past the year 2000. FlatPanel HD has added an Ultra HD Blu-ray database with filters for HDR format, audio format, and whether it was mastered with a 4K digital intermediate or not. So FlatPanels HD, if you're looking for Ultra HD Blu-ray database, it still irritates me that they're kind of trying to lock Atmos behind Ultra HD
they often do.
Blu-rays when they really don't have any reason to do so. It kind of irritates me. But
I do, within this, still want to give a shout out to our friend Steve the Geek, who runs Next Gen Home Theater, because he has been keeping track of Ultra HD Blu-rays since before they launched and putting them into categories so you can tell, delineate them by DTS:X and Atmos and Dolby Vision and all of those sorts of things. However, he wasn't keeping track of the 4K versus 2K digital intermediate, which some people out there still care about. They call the ones that are from 2K digital intermediates, fake 4K or whatever like that. It completely is not the case. I don't agree with that line of thinking whatsoever, but there are people who care about it. So if that's you, FlatPanels HD has that as part of their database, and you can, use the filters to make sure that you're only getting Ultra HD Blu-rays that used a 4K digital intermediate. Good luck, but you can do that.
Yeah. No. Klipsch has released the 7th generation of their entry-level reference series speakers. They get some trickle-down technology with a new horn design that borrows from the reference Premier series and the upgraded aluminum tweeter. There are 10 models in all, so get ready for some model numbers, people. There are 605 FA towers with Atmos speakers built in. Oh my God, my phone.
Yeah.
The A stands for Atmos,
It
obviously.
does.
These are $900 each. These are tower speakers, R605s. The R800F tower, no A, so no Atmos,
That's
$600 each. The 600F tower, $500 each. The 50C, which is, of course, the center channel, for $500 each. The 30C center for $380 each. The 50M, why isn't it B, Rob? Why is that?
Monitor.
Whatever. M is a bookshelf speaker for $400 a pair. The 40M is a bookshelf speaker for $300 a pair. The 40SA, we got the A, so we're back to Atmos module included. Or is this just this is an angled surround? Is this
You have the option.
Atmos
You
module?
can use it as an upward firing Atmos module or hang it on the wall as an angled surround. It's that type of design.
$600 a pair.
Kind of
$600
overpriced,
a pair.
I don't know.
What? The bookshelves are $400 a
I
pair,
know.
and these are $600 a pair.
I don't know. I didn't do it.
The R121 SW, guess what that is? It's a 12-inch sub. The R101 SW, it's a 10-inch sub. So those are $600 and $500 each. And you shouldn't really buy either of them. So
Probably not, but there we go.
we would not recommend.
I'm quite excited to see a update to the reference series speakers. I haven't been the biggest fan of the outgoing reference series.
Right.
I mean, I like the price. I love their efficiency for the people who need that, but I wasn't a huge fan of the sound quality. I was quite pleased with the reference Premier series. So if this new tweeter, this new horn design that borrows from the reference Premier horn design, this new aluminum tweeter instead of the old titanium tweeter that they used to be using, if that has some improvements, if it sounds more like the reference Premier series, which by all accounts in all the marketing seems to be the goal, then I will be pleased. So hopefully you can check these out and give a thumbs up to them, but I have hopes for the new series of reference speakers from Klipsch.
Looking forward to all the pictures on Reddit of people with their tower speakers 3.5 feet away from their couch and wondering if they should buy an external amp to make them sound better.
Yes.
You should definitely do that. Go buy your amp. Go buy your amp and then turn it up to 2.
Yep.
Questions. John is into headphones and already has a pair of planar magnetic headphones plus a couple of
SCHIIT
audio headphone amps, but he enjoys doing comparisons and he also wants to have at least 2 pairs on hand and on hand at all times. The headphones, I said headache. I have a headache.
Yeah,
the headphones get used at night when other members of the house are asleep, so there's a headphone amp positioned on either side of the couch. One for him and one for his wife, I would guess.
Or maybe he just shifts seats. Who knows?
That's very strange. So with the budget of $600 max, he'd like to try something with a flattish sound profile and maximum clarity. He's considering the Hi-Fi Man Edition XS for $500, a monoprice M1070C for $400, and the Shure SRH1440 for $300. Any thoughts on when we think he should get, or was it just something else? Is that monoprice the one I reviewed? I don't remember. No,
I believe, yeah.
Those are the closed back.
This is the closed back version of it. So you've heard something that's got similar technology, but not identical. So maybe you can offer your thoughts on that, because I mean, at least you've heard one that's...
I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to go look at them.
Okay.
It's been a while.
I will mention that. So the Shure SRH 1440s, those are their full-sized headphones. Now, as big a fan as I am of Shure's in-ear monitors, I'm wearing them right now. If you're looking on YouTube, I'm wearing the SE215's in-ear monitors. A big fan of Shure's in-ear monitors. I'm not the biggest fan of their full-sized headphones. I mean, they're not bad by any means, but I didn't think they were anything special. I didn't think they were particularly neutral and transparent. So I'm kind of shying away from those. When you've described everything that you want, I definitely do lean towards Hi-Fi Man. My first thought was actually to not spend quite so much. It's nice that you have the budget, but I honestly really like the Sunderas. The Sundera is a model that's been around for a couple of years now, but they're down to $350 now. They used to be $400. They're $350 for the Hi-Fi Man Sundera. And I really, really like those headphones. I'm very tempted to push you towards those. I have not heard this new Edition XS. That is the newest version in the Edition series. It's actually $100 cheaper than the version that it replaces, so that's nice. But yeah, I haven't heard those. Hi-Fi Man is not... It's not as though you can swap one model for another, so I can't just blanket statement say that because I like one Hi-Fi Man headphone that I'm guaranteed to like the rest of them. So I'm not sure on those. I would be absolutely willing to audition the Hi-Fi Man Edition XS, but I will just say, if you're okay with saving some money, then I will definitely give a back into the Sunderas. I really, really like those. What are your thoughts on the mono prices, Tom?
So if you read my review, and I don't have any reason to think... I'm actually looking at this one right here. If you read my review on the 1070s, I don't have any reason to believe that the closed back version will have a significantly different sound. When I compared them to my Oppo PM2s, which kind of fit in your budget, if I remember correctly. Weren't they about $600
it's not like
when they
you
came
can
out?
get those anymore, though.
You can't.
And I think they were $700, if I recall correctly.
They might have been, yeah. So when I compared them to the PM2s, they did lack a little bit of realism as far as I thought. I thought that they didn't quite hold up.
Okay.
I enjoyed them. I didn't find them super duper comfortable because I couldn't get those massive ear cups off and put the other ones on, which I think would have made them more comfortable for me. And I wasn't willing to destroy them. I sent them back. I mean, I don't have them here anymore. I don't know. They left a long time ago, so I can't go back and re-listen to them. They are certainly a good value, I think, for their price point, which is what, like, $400, something like that. I think they're a pretty good value. Now, if it were me, I would probably order them from Amazon and order these Sunderas and then A/B them. Yeah. Because they're $50 is just not worth
they're
arguing over.
Definitely competitors, no question.
So I would consider putting them back to back and because at least with Amazon, you'll be able to send them back probably for free. So, excuse me. So, I can't wholeheartedly say these are the best planar magnetic headphones I've ever heard, because they're not. But they are very good. And, the bass, I felt... I didn't really know how to talk about the bass on those headphones, because I could feel things happening, but they didn't really audibly kick in until around 30 hertz, which with a sweep, I don't know what that really means. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not that they didn't have enough bass output. It just meant that I was listening to them at a reasonable volume and not reference. So I think that you should A/B those two. I think I would be the ones I would A/B. The Sundero, actually, when I have been shopping for, I was thinking about buying myself some new planar magnetics, those were on my short list as well. So I 100% agree with Rob that those would be ones that I would be considering.
Okay.
So one thing we'd like to consider is a wireless option. Is NVIDIA Shield is pretty much its only source device, and it can output a Bluetooth signal itself without needing to add a separate Bluetooth transmitter. So he was thinking he could add a Bluetooth receiver beside the couch and then plug that into his headphone amplifier, or he could consider getting a pair of Bluetooth headphones and maybe not have to mess with any separate adapters at all. He was thinking he's thinking either the Shure Aonic 50, which are $300, or the Jabra Elite 85H, which is $250, might be worth a try. Or do we have any suggestions for Bluetooth headphones that we think would be better, again with a max budget of $600? So he's going to spend $600 on each one of these headphones, because I was thinking, yes, you might be able to get both for $600 the way we're going.
Well, he's just saying that's the max, because for example, Sean Olive has been raving about the newest Martin Logan headphones, which are Bluetooth, but they're like $1,700, so that's beyond John's budget. It's that type of example, right? Gotta keep it under $600. And
he still wants over ear, I'm guessing.
Yes, full size headphones. Yeah,
I have not really reviewed any over ear Bluetooth. I've done a lot of in ear stuff, and for the most part, I've been kind of surprised with what you can get for under $200. Like, you can get some pretty decent stuff for under $200, and now with them everything's got an app, and for the most part, the apps are really good in that you can do all sorts of things.
Right.
I've tested. You can change the control layout. You can, or the control commands. You can EQ them yourself. You can do so many things that it really makes sense. Again, I don't remember the name of the headphones right off the top of my head right here, but the ones I just reviewed, and I can find them on the website. But they those are in-ears, but they are very good, and they have the ability to be completely customizable. Those are the Soundcore Liberty 3 Pro earbuds. So if you're looking for something that's not over-ear, I'm sure Rob has a suggestion for over-ear, but I do not.
Yeah, well, for over-ear, I'm actually, I think I'm going to point you to the Sonys. Because when it comes to full-sized cans that are Bluetooth and work really nicely, not actually the newest Sonys, I'm going to point you back to the WH-1000 XM3s. You'll find the XM4s now, and they are a weird downgrade in that they got rid of aptX HD and aptX LL, low latency, on the XM4s for some reason, and I can't fathom why. Maybe it was a chip shortage thing for all we know, but you can still find the WH-1000 XM3s, and they had all of the best aptX features, which is something you're going to want for what he's looking for, and really good sound quality on those Sonys. So I'm going to point you at those, the XM3s, WH-1000 XM3s from Sony, if you want to go that route. However, we do need to mention, it sounds like he wants to be able to use two pairs of headphones at the same time, and that is something you cannot do with the NVIDIA Shield. It will only output to one pair of Bluetooth headphones. It won't output to two pairs simultaneously. Also, if you do want to be able to continue using the planar magnetics that you already have, but use them wirelessly now, then getting a Bluetooth adapter that can sit on your table beside your sofa and plug into your headphone amp, I think that just makes sense. So I would point you at Avantree's Oasis Bluetooth. It's a transmitter and receiver, but you'll be using it as a receiver. It goes for $80, and I like that one because, again, it has all of the aptX features. It has aptX HD, has aptX LL, so you're getting the very best Bluetooth audio quality that you can with that Avantree Oasis. Yeah, if you want to make sure, you could actually use it as a transmitter, and it will transmit to 2 pairs of Bluetooth headphones if you want to. It does have the ability. So you might end up getting more than one of those Oasis units. You might end up with 3 for all I know, because maybe you want one on either end of the couch and as a transmitter. But it's reasonably affordable. $80 is not bad. Really good quality on that one. So I'm happy to recommend that. And yeah, I think that's about it for that one.
So we tried out the Sofa Baton U1 remote. That's the $50 model that doesn't have the hub.
That's right.
Excuse me. It did not seem to have his Outlaw Audio 976 Pre-Pro in its database, which is shocking.
It is plausible. Yeah, plausible.
So he attempted to use the learning function to teach it the commands from the original remote. The diagram showed the 2 remotes pointed at each other, but he was never able to get it to work. He saw a video where someone had both remotes pointed forward, or at least the device they wanted to control during the learning process. Was that fake, or is that how it actually works? I mean, generally speaking, it depends on where the Sofa Baton the in is.
That's right.
So the remote that you're using usually has a flasher on the front that you point at things. That's why you point at. So wherever the
IR
input,
yes.
the receiver is on the Sofa Baton, that's what you're looking for. You got to know where that is, and then point it at that wherever that is. I mean, it's a really, like, if you could see IR, which you cannot, it's a very bright. It's an explosion of light in your room. I mean, it really is. So it shouldn't be that hard to pick it up, even if the receivers isn't exactly pointing, dead on to the flasher. So,
well, I have a Sofa Baton U1. I have used the IR learning function. The diagram is correct. The IR receiver on the Sofa Baton U1 is on the front, the same place that the IR sender is. So you do point your original remote at the front of the Sofa Baton U1. You do need that 3-inch gap, and it pretty much needs to be a 3-inch gap and nothing else in my experience. If you have the other remote closer or farther away, it does not seem to work. You need to hold down the button that you're trying to learn. So on the original remote, you need to hold that button down, and you'll actually see like a little progress bar on the app as you continue to hold that button down. Now, for me, that has been hit and miss, because on some commands, for example, this happened on my cable box DVR. For whatever reason, the skip back, the button that skips back 15 or 20 seconds, that one wasn't in the database for some reason. Every other button was, the skip back wasn't. So I learned that from the original remote. Well, when I did the holding down the skip back button on my DVR's original remote, I don't know, I guess it was repeating the command too quickly on the original remote, because when I pressed just one single click on the Sofa Baton U1, it would skip back like 2 or 3 times because it had learned the repeating function. So then I just manually pressed the skip button repeatedly while I was learning it, slower. And then when I hold down the skip back button on my U1, it doesn't do it fast enough. So it was like, there's some trial and error there. I'm going to have to press the skip back button a little bit more quickly, but not just hold it down while I'm learning that function, to get the Sofa Baton to repeat the command at the pace that I want it to. So, it's not necessarily 100% for every single button, but yeah, you definitely point them at each other, and yeah, make sure they are 3 inches apart. And it seems to be a very narrow little window that the Sofa Baton is able to see, so you've got to have the height correct, if they're not at the same height for where the IR is coming out of the original. Yeah, I know, Tom's rolling eyes, but I've used it in person. It is picky.
I believe you. That's just silly, though.
About it. I know it's silly.
I guess it makes sense that you wouldn't want it to just
pick up everything from everywhere.
Pick up everything very easily. So yeah, I guess that makes a little bit of sense, but still. Sofa Baton continuing to confuse and
lots of potential, just little quirks and annoyances and waiting times. Yes.
Jason got a flagship Yamaha RX A8A receiver. It has 11 amps built in, and for the first time, he now has 4 in-ceiling Atmos speakers. He's he had only ever had one pair of front heights before. After running YPAO, he got some confusing results. He's used Odyssey for years, and YPAO is a bit different. His 4 in-ceiling speakers are equidistant from his seats, so he figured they'd be labeled as top fronts and top rears. But when he looked at the configuration, the rearmost in-ceiling speakers were labeled as rears instead of overheads. Also, the trim level for the rearmost in-ceilings were 3 dB higher than the trim level for the front end ceilings, even though they're exactly the same distance from the mic position number 1. So is there anything to worry about, anything that needs to be changed, or should he just let YPAO do what it wants? So the 3 dB difference in levels is not super uncommon.
It's certainly nothing to worry about, and it could be entirely explained by, are the front ones closer to a wall than the rear ones are? Because even though they're equidistant from where the mic was, they're probably not equidistant from the walls, so that could definitely have an impact.
Yeah, boundary reinforcement. It could be the positioning of the microphone. I would actually expect the back ones, if the couch was kind of like semi obscuring the mic.
Yeah, but we don't know about his room. Maybe the back of his room is open to his kitchen, so the back wall's way back there, and the front speakers are closer to the front wall, so it could be something like that.
Yeah.
So that's certainly nothing to worry about, a 3 decibel difference in the trim level, because it's probably a boundary reinforcement thing that caused that, or we don't actually know that all 4 of his speakers are identical. He had front heights before, and maybe he got a different pair of speakers for his rear heights. For all we know, we don't have that info. We're assuming
their sensitivity could be completely
different sensitivity. So certainly nothing to worry about on the trim levels being different. Now, as for this label thing, yes, Yamaha labels their speakers differently than everybody else, because Yamaha was doing a thing they used to call presence speakers way back when. They had that before even DTS started doing front height speakers. Yamaha had presence speakers, and so they're still sticking to that. They're sticking to their guns. They're like, the speakers that are elevated, they're still front presence and rear presence, because we've been doing that forever and we're not changing. So I'm not completely certain. I want to be a little bit pedantic on this and say, okay, because the way that the binding posts are labeled on the back of the AV receiver, they label them as extra speakers 1, extra speakers 2, and there's actually an extra speakers 3 on the A8A, because this receiver has the ability to, for example, have 7.2.4 in the main zone, and then also have a powered zone 2, but what it will do is steal 2 of the amplifiers from the main zone whenever you turn on zone 2. So it has that type of option built into it, and that's where the extra speakers 3 binding posts come into play, because it's actually stealing from extra speakers 2 to power extra speakers 3 if you have 2 different configurations. But some of those extra speaker binding posts are right next to the surround back binding posts. So just to be thorough and pedantic, let's make sure that yes, your 7 floor level speakers are plugged in correctly, and that your frontmost overhead speakers are plugged into extra speakers 1, and your rearmost overhead speakers are plugged into extra speakers number 2. So that's that part. But in the configuration, and I think this is exactly what's going on because it lines up with what he said. If you go into the setup menu and go to the speaker part of the setup menu and go into the configuration under speakers, you will see there are 2 line items, one for front presence and one for rear presence. And you can configure the layout of your front presence and the layout of your rear presence speakers. And they only give you 3 options. And in the case of your rear presence speakers, your 3 options are rear, overhead, or Dolby enabled. So I think that's where the rear thing came from, because there is no label of top.
Right.
There is no top label. It doesn't exist in the Yamaha menus. It's rear, which refers to rear heights, which they're expecting are mounted high on your back wall. Overhead, which they've given the name for what everybody else would call top rears, they call overhead. And then Dolby enabled, of course, is the upward firing option. So if what you saw was, I have extra speakers 2, they are rear present speakers, they are laid out as rear. That actually makes sense in Yamaha's stupid naming convention, because that is how they have done it. So I think that makes sense. I think that's what it is. I don't think you have anything to worry about.
Yeah, Yamaha. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it is true. They were doing presence before
they were.
Atmos was even a glimmer in anybody's eye. But Odyssey, at least, they had their wides and fronts or whatever they called them.
Yeah, they had Odyssey
height,
DSX,
elevations.
so they had front heights.
Yeah, but it's not like they're imposing their will upon other people. Karl, first up, it's been decided Karl and E will be getting a 150-inch 1.0 gain white screen for their Vanta Black Theater. Thanks for the additional thoughts, he says. The thoughts being, if you get an ambient light rejecting screen in a totally black room, we're never speaking you to again. So, yeah, I can understand.
That's right.
Yeah, good decision.
Mm-hmm. I'm on board.
So, do we predict that all lamp-based projectors will be phased out within the next 5 years? At his workplace, all of the lamp-based projectors are being phased out in favor of laser-based models, and clearly IMAX and Dolby Cinemas are going the laser route. But if we look at the home market, laser-based models still cost more than lamp-based. So do laser projectors inherently have performance advantages? Enough to justify costing more, or will lamp-based projectors stick around, but maybe only at the low end of the market? I am still, I've said it many times before, and no one has adequately answered the question of what happens when at the end of a laser-based projector's
not
life.
Easily user replaceable. It is a longer life, so I mean, it's got an advantage there. Universally, the laser-based projectors have a longer light engine life than the lamp-based ones, but
I honestly thought the LED lamps were going to be the next step, and we seem to have bunny hopped over them.
I mean, there were LED based ones.
Still LED based ones out there, but they are in the lower end market. You know, they are those business class projectors.
And some like Runco had some in the much higher end market.
Right.
It certainly didn't become as widespread as we sort of expected it to be.
Right.
I think what's helped a lot in the laser based arena is there is definitely some company somewhere that has designed a triple laser engine that is, it's in all of those ultra short throw models. They're all using that triple laser engine that somebody came up with, clearly at a reasonably affordable price point, because like even Samsung in their flagship ultra short throw is using that same triple laser engine. So it helped that somebody somewhere came up with that and OEM'd it to anybody who wanted to put it into their projector, it seems. So that seems to have sped up the adoption of laser. There are, like, particularly in Europe, actual legal things about this, because in terms of energy requirements, they're really clamping down on that, becoming much more strict. So, seeing JVC and seeing Epson starting to shift everything towards laser, I think that has some bearing on it. The power savings are part of it there too. Are laser-based projectors inherently better picture quality-wise? Not necessarily. Sometimes they're actually a bit dimmer because, getting the lasers to be as bright as a lamp is not necessarily that easy. Where a laser would inherently have an advantage over pretty much any lamp-based system is trying to get to the widest color spectrums, trying to get to that DCI P3 or the Rec 2020 color gamut. Now, again, it's not as though because it's a laser, it's automatically wider color. It's just that you can get to those wider colors because the bandwidth of light, the wavelength of light coming out of there is very narrow and very precise. So to get to those really wide color points, you can do that more easily with a laser than you can with a lamp. So that is definitely an advantage that they have there. But in terms of something like black level or contrast, like that's still up to the panel. That's still up to the LCD panel or the liquid crystal on silicon or the DLP panel. It's not really that lasers help you there. You can, of course, flash a laser in a way that you can't flash a lamp. So when it comes to something like DLP, you can flash the laser more rapidly. That's letting us have these 240 hertz refresh rate projectors now, things like that. So, and instead of having a color wheel, you could sequentially go through the laser colors, like we did with the LED lights. So instead of having to have a spinning color wheel, you can do that just with the laser sequencing because they can flash on and off that quickly. In terms of like full on, full off contrast, you could actually just turn the lasers off. So in that sense, you could have a truly black screen, but it's not as though you can do like local dimming on a projector. It doesn't work that way. So I don't think it's that going to laser like automatically means, oh yeah, the picture quality is going to be, hugely superior. The color is the main advantage, and then the lifespan, but not being easily user replaceable. So there's trade-offs. But I do think we're only going to see more and more laser projectors. I don't really doubt that, even if it's purely because of a energy saving thing. I just think that is the direction we're going.
Well, LEDs also fulfill that role as well,
Sure.
as far as on the energy side.
Yeah.
So, you know, I hate to say it, but it's probably true. I think the word laser is why we have laser projectors. I think that people just got, you know, they love lasers.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone loves lasers. They just think lasers are the coolest. And I think that's why we skipped LEDs, because I think there have been some pretty mediocre LED products. And I'm not talking projectors. I'm just talking in general. People have had experience with LEDs and maybe not been as impressed with LEDs or don't have that trust that they need to have within an LED based projector. That maybe focus group wise, they were like, we could sell the same projectors that we're making right now and put an LED lamp in it and sell them for the same price, or we can take that projector, shove a laser in it, and people will pay more because of the word laser.
Yeah. Well,
and
yeah,
I think that might have a lot to do with
the
it as
Epson
well.
LS11000 and 12000. They aren't dramatically different from the 5050 UB and the 6050 UB that are going out there, but they have shifted to lasers, and they've updated the LCD panel so that it refreshes at a higher rate. So there's a little bit more to it than just that. But you know, the chassis is the same, the lens is the same. There's a lot that has been reutilized.
But that price.
But the price is a little different. The price went up, but I mean, it's $1,000 difference, you know. So I mean, that's certainly not chump change, but it's not, you know, astronomical when it comes to projectors. When we're already starting at $3,000. I mean, the other thing,
still a third increase.
Yeah, the other thing where lasers do have a sort of an inherent advantage is they do not color shift and dim as quickly as the lamp will. So, you know, instead of having to get your projector recalibrated like every year if you use it somewhat frequently and want to be really, really accurate and it's lamp-based, you can probably get that laser projector calibrated like once at the beginning, maybe once in the middle of its lifespan, and that's about it. You know, there shouldn't be very much color shift and dimming going on with the laser light engine.
Cue the custom installers talking about how much better incandescent lamps are than laser lamps and all of the reasons. Chris's ears perked up when he heard us recently say that the crossover knob on your subwoofer should be turned all the way up as high as it can go, or preferably turned off by or bypassed completely if possible. Okay. I am sorry.
Tom's
I
struggling.
need more liquid.
Okay.
What if you have it at, say, 100 hertz, but then the crossover and AV receivers are set at 80 hertz? Would that make any difference since the receiver is rolling off the base at a frequency lower than the subwoofer's crossover knob anyway? Now he's worried he's had a critical error in his setup this whole time. It's a crossover. So there is some, you know, at the point of the crossover, okay, so the subwoofer's playing higher. So if you have yours set to 100 and the whatever it is set to 80, okay, the signal that's coming in from the AV receiver, right? That signal is essentially saying at the crossover you're like 3 dB down for both, but they're both playing at the same volume, right? But then below that point, the the speakers are still playing, and above that point, the subwoofer is still playing. So with the higher crossover on the subwoofer, you know, it shouldn't affect that much how the subwoofer sounds, but you know, it is I guess theoretically going to affect the other direction, and how much of the speaker's information is.
I mean, it's not affecting the speaker, but you are getting cascading crossovers with this setup. So if we think about the sweep playing from low to high, right? So imagine there's a sweep starting down at 20 hertz and playing up to, let's say, 200 hertz. What's going to happen if the AV receiver's crossover is set at 80 hertz and then the subwoofer's own built-in crossover is set at 100 hertz? So as that sweep is going up, there's nothing happening, no volume being filtered off until we get to a little bit below 80. You know, it's going to be like 70, 75 is when that filter just begins to kick in from the AV receiver. And it's applying a low pass filter, and it's typically 24 decibels per octave. So if that were the only filter in place, was the AV receiver's filter. Then at 80 hertz, it's going to be 3 decibels quieter than everything below 80 hertz. And then as we get up to 160 hertz, it's going to be 24 decibels quieter at 160 hertz than it was at 80 hertz. It's a 24 decibel per
but
octave.
not with that 100 hertz crossover you have on the subwoofer, because then it's going to cross that over.
That's
you're gonna
right.
You're going to get more.
You're going to get
more
another filter
decrease
on top of it. So that
Okay.
subwoofer, yeah, your camera moved, I know.
It's because of the dog. He's sleeping and
that's
he's
who
having a
moved
dream
it.
and he's kicking the camera. I'm like, what is going on with this camera? And the dog's down there. Felix.
It's the dog.
Felix.
But yes, getting back to Chris's question, yeah. So you've got this filter being applied by the AV receiver. Now what's happening, because if your subwoofer's own built-in crossover knob is set at 100 hertz, so it's 3 decibels quieter at 80 hertz, it's continuing to get quieter and quieter at a rate of 24 decibels per octave from the AV receiver. But when it gets to 100 hertz, it runs into a second filter that tells it to get quieter still. That's the subwoofer's own built-in filter. So it isn't completely accurate. Are you likely...
It would not be a critical error.
Are you likely to have even heard it or noticed it? It's pretty low odds, but it is not 100% correct in the way that the original crossover, which is, a fourth order crossover on both ends, the way that was originally envisioned and designed in a Linkwitz-Riley crossover. Technically, you haven't been adhering strictly to that by having the subwoofer's own built-in knob set to 100 hertz. We don't think it's a critical error, but... you could turn that knob until it says bypass, or as high as it goes if you don't have a bypass setting, and run your room correction again, and I doubt you're going to hear any difference.
You won't hear a difference. So the problem is when you have somebody setting it 80 hertz at one and 80 hertz at the other, and then it just basically...
That's a double filter. Now you got a 48 decibel per octave filter instead of 24. And that might be noticeable. Yeah.
Well, you're going to be 6 dB down for each source, which means together they're going to be 3 dB down lower than they should be, and that's going to be audible. So you're going to look at your, like if you were to take a Room EQ Wizard and you mic 1 and do a measurement, you're like, why do I have this suck
dip
out at 80 hertz? Well, it's because you're stupid crossovers. So he's sitting about 12 feet away from a 120-inch screen and using an Epson 5050 UB projector. Should HDR content all look noticeably brighter than SDR content in this setup? Because it doesn't seem to. Should he be switching lamp modes to make HDR brighter? I don't know. Probably.
So, there's two parts of this. To answer that second part first, technically, yes, the HDR mode is intended to be used with high lamp mode. By default, that's what happens when you first do it. If you brought that down because you wanted to lower the fan noise or because you wanted to save your lamp life, completely understandable. But in terms of what the tone mapping curve that's built into the Epson 5050 UB was originally expecting, it was based on high lamp mode. Now, you've got those 16 steps. You can manually adjust the slider of HDR to make sure that it doesn't look too dim overall when you lower the lamp mode, so it's not as though you have no recourse if you move away from the defaults. But by default, it was, expecting to use the high lamp mode. Now, should all HDR content look noticeably brighter than all SDR content? No, because the majority of the image is still in the signal between 0 and 100 nits. The majority of the image is still the same as it ever was in HDR versus SDR. It's not as though everything just gets brighter in HDR. That's not the idea. The average picture level doesn't change a whole bunch. On a projector, it remaps what was in the signal from 0 to 100 nits down to 0 to 50 nits. That's what projectors do. Is sort of shrink everything down. But you shouldn't, it's not as though if you're watching a movie and you're watching the SDR version and then you go to the HDR version, you just go, oh wow, the HDR version is so much brighter. That's not what HDR does. It's little highlights. It'll be a little light on something. It'll be the glint of the sun off of a chrome bumper. It'll be the glint of the sun off of ocean waves, something like that. Those little highlights, those should be brighter in HDR. There should be a greater range from the blackest black to the brightest thing on screen. That is the high dynamic range. It is a larger range than SDR. On a projector, it's only about double. that's sort of what we're aiming for. We're aiming for like 110 nits for the brightest thing from a projector. That's like the cinema standard. So it's not that you're going to just be wowed by how much brighter everything is. That's not what we're looking for.
Keshaun really doesn't have a question this week. Great. This next one. Scrolling down. But he shared a lot of pictures and details, so it was a bit much for a comment section. He's excited because he was finally able to move from a townhouse into a single house. It apparently sold that townhouse to one of our other listeners. And he has a rectangular enclosed room in the basement with no windows for a dedicated home theater. The room is 11.5 by 24 by 8. He was a little concerned at first that it would be too narrow, but with his new theater recliners from 4 seating installed, he's very happy with the results and even feels the narrow layout helps to direct all of your attention at the screen. The whole theater setup utilized a bunch of our advice, so let's run through some details. The room started off with plain white walls in the ceiling. In his old place, he had used generic black paint from Walmart. This time he went to Sherwin-Williams, like we've often recommended. Light gray on most walls, but he painted the front wall and the ceiling and the front portion of the side walls in Sherwin-Williams tricorn black. It's noticeably better than the Walmart black paint and completely disappears into the black velvet trim of his screen when the lights are off. Okay.
So showing some pictures in progress. He also put down a black area rug. It looks as though he's got sort of that very low pile basement carpet that you would expect to find in a basement. But then he put down a black rug in front of that. So the whole front portion of his theater is blacked out pretty much.
One seat.
Well, when he started.
He did a quick test. He had his Klipsch reference Premier speakers installed along with 4 of his 10-inch monolith subs lined up along the front wall.
Read the next part. I put it right in there.
I'm not reading that. He says, don't freak out, Tom. The story progresses. I'm freaking out. I don't approve. Don't ever do that. That subwoofers should never be that close to each other. He stood his 4 Mondo traps from the real traps against his side walls, stuffed the opening below his center speaker stand with acoustic foam, and bought a single recliner. He ran Odyssey from his Marantz AV7705 Pre-Pro as quickly as possible, so only 3 measurement positions. So there's some more pictures here, so many pictures, lots of pictures, 4 subs, tower speakers, unreasonable everything. All right. Those quick measurements were okay, but not great. We might be able to see in his first set of measurements. So if you're on YouTube, there's a ton of measurements here. There's like a lot.
But just looking at the first column right now, just for while we're talking here, the first column is all we're looking at. Okay.
We might be able to see his first set of measurements that there was a big suck out all the way from 50 to 90 hertz and some fairly big squiggles. And his speaker frequency responses too, but the room definitely wasn't fully completed yet.
Poor Tom.
Excuse me.
Poor listeners' experience.
I might have to go get something hot to drink because I didn't have any coffee, and I only had like half a cup of coffee left in the house. So he installed a riser for a second row of seats, even though it isn't used very often. He's glad he did. It just feels better since he always wanted it, and it would have been on his mind if he hadn't done it. Plus, it makes sense for the length of the room, and it's nice to have it when he does need it. He went to Acoustimac on our recommendation and used their calculator to work out how many panels he should have. He ended up buying 6 4-inch thick Owen Corning 603 bats of insulation, and acoustically transparent fabric from them. He cleverly used the cardboard corner pieces and edge liners from the shipping boxes for his subwoofers to make a DIY reinforcement. So now he has 3 panels on each side, 2 panels on the back wall, and 2 panels on the ceiling. He also put 2 monolith 15-inch subwoofers on his back wall, and then he did a full Odyssey calibration, all 8 measurement positions, and he really wanted to stress how important all of this setup ended up being. We can see the improvement in his Odyssey before graphs, but more importantly, he can absolutely hear the difference, and it's very consistent. Every seat, every speaker, it's the best result he's ever had. So I guess I'm going back up here.
Yeah, if we go back to those measurements, so the middle column and the far right column, the middle column is like after everything was set up. So if we're looking at his initial setup, which was like slap bang quick, the acoustic treatments weren't all in place, the subwoofers weren't optimized, he only did 3 measurement positions, and we see how big the squiggles are in that left column and that big suck out in his subwoofer. subwoofers. Then he adds, so he's got 6 subwoofers total, but I mean, the front wall is basically lined with 10-inch subs, and he's got 2 more 15-inch subs on the back wall. We see that evened out his bass beautifully. The ups and downs of the squiggles in that center column and in the right column, because it's the same measurements to begin with, much reduced from the acoustic treatments that he's put in there. And then he's got a house curve. That's the third column, the far right column there. He's got a house curve where he added in, I think, a bass boost is what it looks like, that he added in on that house curve. So in any event, he's very, very pleased with the results, and the, having subwoofers both at the front and the back and having the acoustic treatments in there really did make a difference, measurably, but most importantly to his ears.
All right, and there's a whole bunch of other pictures here.
There are oodles of pictures. I'll scooch through them as you read the rest there.
Oh, there's more?
I think there's some more at the below.
There's a closet in the back, so he's able to keep his gear in a rack out of view. In addition to his Marantz AV7706 Pre-Pro, he's got 2 Outlaw Model 700X amps, which let him power his 11 Klipsch reference Premier speakers. And
I mean, he had a Pre-Pro, so he had to have amps.
He had to have
amps.
Those
are not unreasonable amps whatsoever.
They are reasonably
very
priced.
Nice, reasonable amps.
Yes. Definitely could have powered these things with a clock radio, but whatever. As well as bass shakers in each seat.
5 of them.
He's got 6 monolith subs, and his projector is the 4K Sony VW325ES with the 115-inch CinemaScope screen. We helped him replace his Sony disc player with the Panasonic UB420, and just want to thank us for all the help we've provided, and he hopes we enjoy the results and the pictures. I will enjoy the pictures more when you say I can use them on AV gadgets.
Yes, I wanted to put that in there. I think he probably did mean that, but it did not explicitly say in his email.
I need an email from you to tom@avgadgets.com that says you may use my pictures, and here they are.
That's right. So I just want to say congratulations, because the main thing by a country mile is that Keshaun is happy with his theater.
Yes.
Nothing matters more than that. But I do love what you've done in here. It looks gorgeous. I, heartily approve of all the things that we've advised you to do. Yeah, that would make sense for us to approve of those things. I am a little bit curious how you get into those seats, because there are some surround speakers sticking right out into the very small walkways on either side of that front row. So I'm not sure what kind of shimmying dance is required to get into the actual front seats there, although we can see this.
You recline the front row so that you can get into the back row.
Something like that. I mean, the door into the room.
I want to know what's going on with these acoustic panels. How is he holding this fabric on? I can see.
Well, yeah, there was a photo way back when.
I see it. It's got like some weird strapping going on.
There are some straps going back there. Let's scooch back through all these photos and see if we can find it for the folks on YouTube. I'm not completely
really
sure. I mean, I guess he used some of that like cardboard reinforcement, and that was enough.
Yeah, but what's those straps? What are those straps connected to? To the
cardboard?
Yeah.
Because it's going to the corners and where he had the edge pieces there. So I guess that was enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very strange.
In any event, congratulations. Happy that it worked out. Those measured results do look very nice. So yes, wonderful.
So if you're watching YouTube, you've seen me leave twice so far from the picture. First time was to go turn my phone off because it just wouldn't stop. And one of them was my wife. And that really irritates me because she knows I'm doing a podcast right now. And the second one was to get up and move that dog's foot so he'd stop hitting my stupid camera. So, because he woke up and he just looked at me like, dude.
Every episode, Tom's side of things just gets more professional. That's
more and more professional. I got to scoot this thing back. I didn't realize how much you knocked it out of the whack.
You have been all askew.
All right. I'm less askew. I think, that should be fine.
Probably overcorrected, but that's fine.
I never overcorrect. Okay, I am going to read this question, and the first chance I get, I'm going to get up and make myself a cup of coffee. Right. Luke and Chris, first, a correction. Last week, we discussed Luke's question about getting a 43-inch TV to use as a computer monitor. Rob mentioned how both the Sony X85J and the Samsung QN90A models use a different subpixel structure. We're used to RBG, red, green, and
No,
blue.
RGB. This is important because the whole thing was that I said the letters in the incorrect order. So we're used to RGB, red, green, blue. RGB.
Subpixels, and that's what a PC is expecting to display, the display to use as well. But these TVs have subpixels arranged in a different order. Rob mistakenly said it was BRG, which is blue, red, and green, but that is wrong. It is actually BGR, which is blue, green, and red. Green is still in the middle. Red and blue have just been swapped. So why does that result in difficult to read text? We'll include a link to a succinct explanation from Display Ninja, but it comes down to subpixel anti-aliasing and the clear type settings in Windows. The Display Ninja write-up includes some suggestions for a way to improve text clarity on BGR displays. So, for Luke, he ended up returning the Sony X85J and paying extra for the Samsung QN90A instead. The good news, the text looks good enough that you can be happy with it, and overall the TV looks great. The Display Ninja write-up and our Rutins, whatever, suggested that one fix for the whole BGR versus RGB issue is to simply flip your TV upside down and then put Windows into landscape flip mode. But doing that breaks VRR for some reason. Not to mention that whenever the suggestion for fix is to turn your TV upside down, that's not reasonable. That's not a reasonable thing. Excuse me. Given that he's finding text acceptable on the Samsung, is this worth trying? No. Can I say no?
Yeah, I mean, given that you're finding it acceptable, I wouldn't do this. Now, I'm not an expert on this side of things whatsoever, but doing some research, there are people who seem to be saying that when it comes to this whole VRR thing, first of all, that seems like the type of thing that maybe a driver update could end up fixing. I'm not saying that this isn't something you have done. This was something that either AMD or NVIDIA, whichever type of graphics card you have, they would be the ones who would have to do this, but seems like something that should be fixed by a driver. But yeah, most people are saying that I'm assuming you're only worried about variable refresh rate VRR while you're playing games. I wouldn't know where else you would be using variable refresh rate. So if you play the game, normally it goes full screen mode, of course, and that seems to be when VRR breaks. Apparently, if you put it into windowed mode, so it can still take up almost the entirety of your screen, but you put it into windowed mode so that if you wanted to, you'd be able to have, windows side by side or change the size of the image. For some reason, having your game playing in windowed mode allows VRR to work again, even when your television screen is physically upside down, and then you've set Windows to landscape flipped for the orientation of the image. So I don't know. I guess that's worth a try. I mean, you can do that without physically flipping your monitor upside down to begin with. You could just put your Windows computer into landscape flipped, try putting your game into windowed mode, and see if VRR functions then. And then if it really does look better, go ahead and turn it upside down, I suppose. So I would try it first before going to the hassle of physically flipping my television upside down. But if that works and that's acceptable to you, I guess you could do that. So then he goes on to say that his graphics card is an AMD RX 5700 XT. That does not have HDMI 2.1, but it does have DisplayPort 1.4, and DisplayPort 1.4 is supposed to be capable of outputting 4K at 120 hertz. Well, he tried doing that with his passive DisplayPort to HDMI cable that he already owned, but it wouldn't let him show 4K 120 on the new Samsung TV when he did that. It also did not automatically put the TV into PC mode when he used this DisplayPort to HDMI cable, as opposed to just running an HDMI cable from the HDMI 2.0 port of his AMD graphics card to the Samsung TV. It would go into PC mode then, but of course it was stuck down at 4K 60, wouldn't go to 4K 120. So he has already gone ahead and ordered an active DisplayPort 1.4 to HDMI 2.1 adapter. So like one that you actually plug into a wall and has some processing. He's ordered that. Looking at the user reviews, they say they've successfully gotten it to send 4K 120 from the DisplayPort out of the graphics card to the HDMI 2.1 port of a television, a consumer television display. But he basically wants to know if that is going to work with his Samsung QN90A, or is a new graphics card, a new GPU that has HDMI 2.1 built into it, the only way to get everything working smoothly. So frankly, I don't know for sure. I am not a DisplayPort expert on this subject. I really don't know. I don't have firsthand experience with it to tell you that for sure it's going to work. I can tell you that if you did get a AMD 6000 series graphics card or an NVIDIA, RTX 30 series graphics card, those graphics cards that do have HDMI 2.1 built right into the card, that will definitely work. I don't know if you'll be able to find any of those graphics cards to purchase, especially at an affordable price, because it still seems like they're extremely scarce and hard to find, but that would for sure work. But will this slightly older, one generation back, that a graphics card that did not have HDMI 2.1 built into the card itself, is that definitely going to work via an active DisplayPort adapter? I was just researching this, same information that's available to anybody else who's searching it. It does seem like there certainly was there were chips that were developed to allow this conversion from DisplayPort 1.4 to HDMI 2.1. 4K 120 doesn't seem to be a problem, but VRR does seem to be a problem with these DisplayPort to HDMI adapters. I saw lots of reports where 4K 120 worked, but VRR didn't. So if that's the case with whatever one that you ordered, I wouldn't be shocked at that. It seems like maybe that is to be expected. So that's about as much as I know on that one. We can go on to Chris, Tom.
LG's OLEDs don't have the RGB subpixel structure either. They have RGBW with a fourth white subpixel. Does that mess up text as well? He's thinking about getting one of the new 42-inch OLEDs to use as a computer monitor, and they seem to be specifically targeting PC users and gamers, especially with that screen size and their marketing. I would think that would be fine.
So these ones, there have been some people who've said that the text doesn't quite look as sharp as they were expecting. That was on the 48 inches, because the 42 inches are maybe just barely hitting the market now. But a lot of that was people sitting, 2.5 feet from a 48-inch screen that has 4K resolution. Like, the pixels per inch on that is low enough at a 48-inch screen size that I think that was predominantly to do with it. But the other side is, there actually is a pixel luminance setting on the LG OLEDs that if you turn that to low or off, it essentially deactivates that white fourth subpixel. Now, naturally, your peak brightness won't be as high. You're just relying on the light output from the red, green, and blue subpixels at that point. You've effectively turned off that white subpixel that is just there to boost overall brightness. That's all that fourth white subpixel is there for. So you won't be able to get as bright, but you won't be affected by this white fourth subpixel if you turn that pixel luminance setting to low or off. So text doesn't seem to be a problem. However, if you're sitting really, really close to a very large display, then you might just run into the pixels per inch. But the 42-inch should be better than the 48-inch on that front. The dog. Okay.
He moved, and then he moved again, and now his foot's back on the camera.
Yep.
So
it might move. That's all right.
Dale would like to wrap his head around Marantz's AV receiver model numbers. What do their model numbers designate in terms of model year and features? I mean, I don't. It's like it's the same way. There's the last two digits tell you what year it is.
It does, except it's not in any particularly sensical way. They're just
it's not like 20. It's like 15 came out in 2015.
I mean, I think LG with their OLEDs is like the only brand where the number on the end actually lines up with the year. The CX, the C10 was 2020, the C1 was 2021, and now the C2 is 2022. But I think LG's OLEDs are like the only thing out there that actually does that. So in Marantz's lineup, currently the newest AV receivers that are presently still available in the SR series, that's the full-sized series, they end in a 15. Now, those came out in 2020. In Marantz's lineup, the ones that have a 15 on the end came out in 2020. They brought out no new AV receiver models in 2021, and we're still awaiting to see if anything new comes out in 2022. They do have their slim line models. Now, they only released a single new slimline model back in 2020, and that was the NR. So SR is full-sized, NR is slimline. I don't exactly know why, and yes, it's ironic that the slimline doesn't start with the S and the full-size does, but I mean, that's just going back. They've always been called that for years and years and years. So the NR, the slimline series, if it ends in an 11, and it was only the 1711, then that came out in 2020. There were no new models in 2021, and we're still waiting new models in 2022. Now, the rest is just series. There's the 50 series, the 60 series, the 70 series, the 80 series. And I mean, that sort of gives you an indication of what features that you're going to be looking at. But I mean, it's pretty much just described in there. You know, the 50 series is multi-Q XT, not XT32, and it's 7 speakers max. That's what it goes up to. That's the 5015. Whatever comes out in 2022 will almost certainly be called the 5016, and it'll be a 7-channel model with multi-Q XT. When you go up to the 60 series, that's where we get to 9 amplifiers built in, but the ability to expand it to 11 speakers total. So you'd have to add at least a 2-channel external amplifier to that. That one is going to have multi-Q XT32, but it's not going to be the full front display. That one's going to be the porthole display. That's what the 60 series has always done. And that is basically the sister model to Denon's 3000 series. It is the exact same feature set as the X3700H, except that it doesn't have the full front display, but it does have a full set of multi-channel analog inputs that Denon doesn't have. That's like the one feature Marantz still has is multi-channel analog inputs on the back. The 70 series gives you the full front panel. It also gives you Oro 3D, and that's going to be the sister model to the Denon X4700H, or this year it's going to be the X4800H and the SR7016, almost certainly. And then the 80 series is the flagship in the receiver lineup, and that matches up with Denon's 6000 series. So that's got 11 amplifiers actually built into it. Now, when we take one step over to the separates, because Marantz has separates and Denon doesn't, they have dedicated pre-pros. That is where, like, you have the equivalent of Denon's X8500H. That was the AV, so they always put AV at the front of their AV processors, AV pre-pros, as opposed to receivers. So that's the 8805. So they had an 8500 and an 8805. Those both came out in 2019, and then they updated them to support HDMI 2.1 in 2020. So it became the AV8805A. And also in 2020, the AV7706 came out, and that had the exact same feature set as the SR8015. So take the flagship receiver, strip out all of the internal amplifiers, put some XLR outputs on the back of it, and you call that a pre-pro. And that's what you do. Also increase the price by a bit. Yeah.
Charge more. Yeah, that's right. That's the important bit. Right. Get less for more money because somebody on the internet told you it was a good idea. Yeah. So there, if you're not like year after year following,
that is the problem.
What's coming out? Yeah. There is no sense to what it is if you are not familiar with the fact that last year it was this, the 1700 series, and now it's the 1800 series, but it's still within basically the same line, and it's only when you go up by the 1000 that you get into the new line,
the
with
new
the kind
series.
of the new...
Yeah, and then the 2 numbers on the end, they do indicate the year, but not in any way that is intuitive or makes sense. So,
No. Joe helped his employer with setting up a theater room in an assisted living complex, and now they have a similar project in the works. His
employer, yes.
Yeah. They learned from the last project they should have included an AV rack to better organize the gear, and they should have insisted upon acoustic treatments. Like, I'm sure we never mentioned that. While the budget for this new project has some flexibility, there are definitely constraints, and wanting to keep the price as low as possible. Joe has stressed the importance of properly planning the HVAC for the room, which is meant to hold 12 to 15 people. That's a lot of body heat.
Yeah.
His company, and if you've got a projector, his company will take care of making sure there's proper conduit, wiring, networking, and airflow for all the equipment, as well as zoned lighting. There is some concern about aesthetics, with the desire for speakers to be visually hidden, because in assisted living places, God help you if you actually see a speaker. That makes all the sense. and everything to appear clean and tidy. The room color is gray and neutral, and the acoustic treatments will need to look nice and complement the space. Printed panels, my dude. I cannot tell you how many places I have been in recently. College tours, hotels, just lobbies in general, where I have looked around and gone, that could have been an acoustic panel.
Yep.
That could have been. They are the right thickness. They are the right size. Dog, is it possible for you to sit down and not bump something?
The most distracted Tom has ever been in a podcast. The most ups and downs, the most dogs, the most phones.
Putting him in a stupid crate next time. He's not quite 2, and he's goofy, and he can't figure out where he starts and stops, so he keeps running into stuff. So yes, they're like literally go to GIK and look at their included. Like they have their printed panels.
He already showed like they already liked some of the not the printed panels, but the ones that have the decorative so-called diffusion panels on the front. So those were already liked, already basically approved.
That would be fine. Yeah. But for everybody else, like everyone out there who's like, I can't have acoustic panels in my theater because it needs to look clean. I'm like, you're telling me you have flat gray walls and nothing on it, right? Yeah. The entire room has nothing on it.
I don't blame most people still picture the egg cartons on the walls or maybe the pyramid foam, and they're like, I don't want my room to look like that. And I go, I don't blame you. But it doesn't have to. We can definitely do nicer.
We were just at so this last weekend my kids were at a climbing competition, and we stayed at the Hampton Inn, and they had 2 foot by 4 foot, maybe a little bit bigger than that, 4-inch thick art on the walls, and they covered most of the wall surrounding a window. And I went up and touched it. I was like, this could have been fabric and filled with insulation.
It definitely could have.
And it's just not. People just don't do it. Yeah. So he's included the equipment list from the previous complex, but knows that prices have gone up since then on basically everything, and not all of that gear is still current and available. He's added an AV rack and acoustic treatments to the budget. There's an Excel chart. There's no chance I'm reading all this crap. So Joe would basically like a once-over from us, anything that clearly needs to be changed, and there's also some concern about in-wall speakers within any of the shared walls. He has already discussed potentially needing to beef up any shared walls with double drywall and green glue for soundproofing purposes. That's not going to work. Can we do on walls instead of in walls? Can we? I mean, is that a possibility?
You could. I mean, like it sounds like they're doing at least some amount of construction. It sounds like his company is mostly like IT and networking and that, but they're just sort of tasking them with also installing this theater, hopefully on a pretty low budget. Although that's a quite the challenge that they've put you into. But I mean, there's going to be some amount of construction going on there. You know, he's already talking about. You might want to think about soundproof. You're definitely going to want to think about HVAC. Tom is, right in saying that if you just take the party wall and beef that up with another layer of drywall, even with green glue in between, like it's not going to do nothing, but it's also not going to make it soundproof because it's the entire structure. If the entire structure is still joined or being assisted living, maybe all the ceilings in here are drop tile. That's quite common. A lot of places, all the ceilings are drop tile. Well, all of that is still open air where the sound can move. You haven't actually soundproofed. So, I mean, you can reduce a bit of the sound transmission just by beefing up a party wall. That it's not as though that does literally nothing, but you're not going to go from this is bothersome to I don't hear it at all. You're going to go from this is bothersome to maybe it's slightly less bothersome, but it's definitely not going to be fully soundproof. So they don't have the type of budget where they're going to fully reconstruct this room. So I would try to set their expectations appropriately. If all they're going to do is minimal amount of construction, don't expect soundproof. It's just not going to be the case. You could consider on-wall, although getting on-walls that are going to be sufficient for this room size is a bit of a challenge because a lot of on-walls
I mean,
are small.
It's going to be a lot of in-walls anyways,
well, I like his choice. I mean, the thing is, if there's going to be some construction and opening up of walls anyway, just make sure you've got proper backer boxes. That's really all we really need to make sure of. I mean, truly proper backer boxes, ones that are airtight, ones that have all their edges sealed with caulk, ones that are insulated inside. So don't cheap out on these backer boxes.
Right.
Don't go super slapdash. Make them properly. And then I'm not super concerned about using in walls. He's suggested HSU, shoe in walls. And I am very on board with that because they are a very efficient design. Those are shoes horn loaded in wall speakers. You want to click on the link there, Tom, because I know that's unreadable inside of the document. So
No, I'm. What's the size of the room?
I don't know.
It says it's going to hold 12 to 15
I
people,
don't
but I
know
can
the
shove 12 to
dimensions.
15 people in the elevator if I try hard enough.
I'm assuming it's bigger than that. But I mean, if we are looking at a room that's meant to hold 12 or 15 people, I'm going to want some efficient speakers that.
Yeah, I think so too.
And the shoes
HSU,
are
those
very
certainly,
affordable. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're affordable and they qualify, but you're still going to want multiple side surrounds, multiple,
Most likely.
at least two.
Yeah.
In order to fully do that, and who knows how many surround backs you might need. I mean, you're going to have to set this up more like an actual theater.
A little bit.
Two
No,
surround
I
backs.
agree with his plan. He wasn't going to go for Atmos. He's like, just do us, do a 7.1. He was hoping to get them with 2 subwoofers, and he's going SVS and not going overboard. He's suggesting the PB1000 Pros. I don't have any problem with that because I don't. Like, this is an assisted living complex. I don't think we necessarily want to get to 115 decibels at 20 hertz. Like,
No.
I don't really
Though
think
we may have to for people to actually hear it.
Possibly.
There could be that issue as well. It could be that they want it louder than...
Right.
But yes, you would definitely... I might even say just go 5-point in here.
That is a very reasonable thing to suggest.
Multiple side
multiple
surrounds,
side
no surround backs,
Yeah.
no Atmos.
Because the thing
Big
is, I'm picturing
center
if this is
channel.
12 to 15 people, it might be 3 rows of seats. He definitely talked
Yeah.
about having a riser for at least 2 rows. So this might be like, 6 seats across in 2 rows. But I'm just thinking, if this room isn't gigantic and that back row is actually close to the back wall, I don't want surround backs because the poor people back there are going to have surround backs blasting straight into their ears from the back wall. They're not going to be able to hear the dialogue, which I'm guessing is going to be the number one thing that they want to hear is the dialogue in here. So I am on board with Tom's appraisal here that you probably don't want surround backs. I'm not super keen on, but multiple side surrounds could be helpful because you're going to have at least 2 rows of seats. So I'm on board with the HSUs. I think they're a good choice. Just make sure you do proper, fully sealed, insulated backer boxes, and then I'm not too concerned there. If you want to save some money on the subs, maybe look at monoprice instead, because the PB1000 Pros are not cheap anymore. Like, he's got their old price in the list here, and they're $800 now. They're not $600 like they used to be. They're $800 now. So maybe look at the monolith subs to save some money there, because
And you won't have to worry about anybody stealing them because they weigh like the smallest one weighs 75
but he's
pounds,
picking them up.
76
Although
pounds or
they're
something like
rounded
that.
edges now, so they're not going to dig into their skin quite as much when they try to pick them up. It's a little bit nicer there.
If you are worried about stuff like that, though, then the cylinder subs, just as far as like not worried about people hurting themselves, because I know like all of my relatives who are older, they get cut by looking at paper.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, they start bleeding very easily. So rounded corners might not be enough for you. You may want to look at those cylinder subs simply because they're just going to be
and they're going to be
for
easier
DVD
to
around.
position. They already come with the subwoofer isolation feet, which he's put into the budget. So you're already going to have those on the cylinders. Not necessarily even the 2000 Pros. There are probably PC 2000s for sale, available, because it's not like they're going to...
You may be able to contact them. You're a business too.
Exactly.
Don't forget about that. Contact
and
all
also-
of these people and say, hey, we're a business.
Yeah.
We're doing this installation here. Do you have pricing for...
Because, I mean,
business.
SVS does have their outlet store. Also, I'm just thinking if there are people out there who are upgrading their PC 2000s, possibly even to just PC 2000 Pros. So I would definitely look into the cylinder subs. I really like that idea for multiple reasons. So I'll just quickly go through, I think your choice of projector is good. The Epson Home Cinema 3800. I was going to say, you could save a few $100. Optima's UHD 38 DLP projector is very nice and bright and a good performer, but it has no lens flexibility in that Optima. Whereas the 3800 has horizontal and vertical lens shift and a nice range of zoom. So setting up the 3800 is going to be way easier. It just doesn't cost $1,400 anymore. It costs $1,600 to $1,700. So it's a few $100s more. He was aware of this, but I still like that as your choice. Silver ticket for the screen, absolutely. I don't think you need to spend all the way up to $1,300 to $1,700 for the X3700H from Denon. I just don't think that's necessary in here. I think a frankly, a 1700H
I was going to say, if you go 5-point, you can save a lot of money that way. Cause
well, that can even do 7. The 1700H could do 7 if you wanted to. So I think a 1700H is completely sufficient here. If you do want something that is expandable and for some, like if you're worried about full future-proofing, HDMI 2.1 or something like that, the Onkyos can't be gotten right now. They're completely sold out, and I don't know when they're coming back. But Integra's DRX 3.4, that's the Integra version of it. It is $1,300. Right. That is what you have budgeted, and that one has Dirac built in, so it's completely comparable to Multi-Q XT32. But I actually think the X1700, you can save yourself some money there because I really think that's all you need. The rest of everything that I'm seeing in here, you're not going to be able to get the J10 from APC anymore, but you can get one of the gaming performance units. So you're looking for the the BR.
Yeah, he's got a Harmony remote on here too.
1350 MS.
Yeah,
the Harmony remote you're not going to be able to do. I mean, if you're willing to struggle through the setup of the Sofa Baton X1, once it's actually set up, I'll give a little update for this week. Once it's actually set up, it's really quite nice to use. So I don't have any problem in actually using it.
There is now an article on AV Gadgets about it. We published it this morning. So it does. We are pretty much in agreement with you.
Yeah.
He looked at he had the same sort of problems you did as far as setting it up the first time, but it was once he got it set up.
Once it's set up, yeah. So I mean, the thing is, the people using it, they're not going to be the ones setting up. You're the one who's going to have to deal with setting it up. So as long as you're willing to do that, I think the Sofa Baton X1,
you just got to teach them to flick the wheel when they pick it up to wake it up, and then don't do because if not, then
so I would say that's my once over appraisal of it. I think it's a little bit of setting expectations. The only other thing I would say is the acoustic treatments. He has put in the GIC panels, the Impression series panels that they like the looks of. I of course have zero problem with that. I think that's completely reasonable. But if you wanted to save some money and you didn't need the pattern on the front of it, I think the suede panels from Acoustimac, they're really, really nice looking. You can absolutely get colors that'll 100% complement the look of this room. Whatever color you want in that suede finish, I think looks really, really nice at a considerably lower price. So that's just something to look into. If it's a matter of saving a few $100s here and there, those are the places to do it.
Yeah. I'm telling you, those you can have it look like art on the walls just by going and
that'll
using
cost
the
a little bit more.
It will, but if you're looking, I mean, their panels, the art, the free art they have, looks like anything you might find in a hotel
Acoustimac
lobby
has
or
printed
like
panels too, so that's
right.
You can do it all from either company.
Infinite Gary. He says, what is an IMAX 6-track audio? What is the speaker layout? I swear, the fact that you have linked up Wikipedia here just tells me he's not looking these things up himself. I mean, it's
not super obvious because they didn't reference it exactly by that. They originally called it the IMAX double audio system, and that was because they used 100% of the IMAX film for the video, and then they had a film follower. It was additional film that just had the soundtrack on it, and that was how they originally did things when everything was all analog. So it was a 6-track system. Now, they do not have an LFE track, a low frequency effects track. They have 6 full range signals. It is the 5 channels that we're used to, front, left, center, right, and the 2 surround channels. And then they have a center height because the screen is so darn tall that they decided to have a 6th center height channel. And that is how they did it. Now, so that began as analog. It began as film. They had sort of a lock, like a mechanical lock to synchronize the audio with the video. Then in the early 90s, they switched over to a proprietary version of DTS. Again, DTS was 5.1. So instead of having the 0.1, they made a 6th full range, and that was the center height. So it was a proprietary version of DTS. That came on CDs because that's the way DTS was delivered. So it was still separate from the image completely, but that came on CDs. In the late 90s, they switched over to using hard drives, and then they just didn't compress the audio at all. They just had 6 full uncompressed channels of PCM, and that's how they did it. But the channel count was the same, and the layout was the same. So yeah, that was it. That was IMAX 6-track.
I know that their screen is very large. I just don't know how useful it is to have 2
center speakers,
competing center speakers, especially when you have one that, I mean, in theory is near ear level for the people, and one that's 20 feet up in the air. You know, I mean, the comb filtering.
That's what they did.
Point would have a problem. Gary just wanted to share some pics of his new Luxman stereo integrated amp that he bought for his 2-channel setup. He's enamored with its build quality, including its remote. He enjoys that its volume knob is motorized, so you can see it move when you press the volume up and down on the remote. I haven't had something that's done that in a while, but that is very cute.
It does feel fun.
On the practical side of things, it's super easy to switch between speaker A and speaker B outputs. He'll enjoy using that for direct A-B speaker comparisons. Okay. There it is.
There it is. Amplifier. It looks very nice and clean in his setup, so I approve.
It does. He has a record player on top. Bertrand, using his Panasonic UB820 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, an annoying control hub sometimes appears on the screen. He's definitely not trying to make it appear. It just seems to show up all on its own, and it won't go away. He randomly presses buttons on the remote and got it to go away before, but isn't sure what button he pressed. Time to slow down when you're pressing those buttons. It says it's in the looks like in the lower right of the screen. It says this control panel can be displayed via options. So one might think that the option button would be the button you would press. Can we figure out why this is showing up, how to make it stop, and how to make it go away? I don't know.
So I did find reference to it in the Panasonic manual for the UB820. It is called the control hub, and yes, you do access it not just by pressing option. You press option, then have to select control panel from what shows up when you press option. Now that is if you want to make it appear. That's how you would do it. You press option and select control panel. In the manual, it does mention if you press the return button on the remote control, that's how you make it go away.
That's what I would guess. It's the exit, return, or option would be mine.
That's right. Although, I mean, return is not the most intuitive thing. It's exit, back, maybe.
Exit and return I find to be pretty much the same thing.
Usually, but that is the way to make it disappear. Now, why is it showing up all its own? Well, if you wanted to guess HDMI CEC, you'd be right. Now, of course, Panasonic doesn't call it HDMI CEC because they want to trademark it and call it Viera Link. So you have to look up the Viera Link settings and turn that off. Because Viera Link, basically, anytime you do something on the remote that, this can be replicated by the control panel, it shows up on your screen. And then you have to press return to make it go away. HDMI CEC, isn't it? It's the thing. It's
the best.
Solves so much.
Never has a problem ever arisen that HDMI CEC couldn't be at least partially to blame for.
Seems like.
So Bertrand organized a local get-together, and home theater tour with 2 other home theater enthusiasts in Quebec City. It was fun meeting new people and seeing and hearing each other's setups. In Bertrand's theater, he typically listens to his master volume set at -10 or -5 for most movies. And one of the other home theaters, they were playing the opening scene of Tenet as a demo. The master volume on the Anthem receiver was powering the setup. Was set to -21, but it was way louder than in Bertrand's setup, and the AV receiver actually shut itself down. Can we speculate as to why this happened? I mean, there's lots of speculation that you could come up with. So it was set to -21, which is not that loud. He didn't tell us how big the room is or what speakers it was powering. He said it was an Anthem receiver.
Yes, now that is one clue, because Anthem, their room correction system, which it's acronymized as ARC, Anthem Room Correction. Now, that was around before HDMI ARC, but anyway, I'll just call it Anthem Room Correction because that is what it's called. Now, that one runs on your computer. It does not run on the AV receiver, and it does not set the trim levels. That's not part of what it does. You're responsible for manually setting the trim levels in your AV receiver when it comes to Anthem. So that... I don't know what he set it to. Maybe he turned them all the way up because he's just
it could be.
This is as high as... Because, I mean, -21, why that? Even if he had left all the trim levels at 0, although who knows, maybe he's using JTR speakers. And,
I know, could be.
They
There's
are
so many variables.
103 decibels per 1 watt efficient, right? We don't know. It's possible. So... Clearly, he did not manually adjust the trim levels to actually be at reference volume. If at minus 21, it was louder than your system, which we do know Bertrand has run Odyssey multiple times. So his is at reference volume. Bertrand's system is at reference volume. So if minus 21 on this person's setup was louder than your setup at minus 5, then their trim levels were not properly calibrated.
Loudness or feeling like something is too loud isn't necessarily a function of volume. Like we sit here and assume as much, but the minute a speaker starts to distort, even if it's not as loud, it sounds run for the volume knob because it sounds bad.
That's true.
And it hurts. So there's a lot of things that could be going on here. So whenever a receiver shuts itself down, my first thought, no matter what the volume is at, is that there's a speaker wire that's going haywire, and that's what's making it do it. Could be that he's overdriving the amplifier section. It's going into oscillation. It's heating up too much, something, and the receiver shutting it down for that reason. There's a lot of things that could be going on here. We could, like I said, I can speculate. But the fact that you found it to be louder, even though the volume level was lower than what you would expect it to be, doesn't necessarily mean it was actually louder. It could just be an overly bright room with, highly inefficient speakers, or maybe very efficient speakers that are being driven way too hard and are, aren't that accurate and are somehow, who knows what kind of EQ they applied to.
That's right. That's absolutely
could be a lot of stuff going on.
They could have been running their speakers full range and put a big old bass boost into the speakers that can't really be played. There's a lot you can mess up with Anthem room correction because it is very hands-on. It is a very manual system. And so it is entirely possible to mess things up using Anthem room correction. I'm not blaming it because it's very good if you use it correctly, but it is quite possible to mess things up. So I do strongly suspect he did not actually manually set the trim levels correctly. That seems very plausible and likely. But yeah, the rest of it, Tom's absolutely right. Too many variables for us to know with the amount of information that we have been privy to. One other thing, though, is Anthem's receivers do not have equal power to all channels. They typically only have 60 watts going to the surround and surround back and overhead channels. That's what's built into those AV receivers. So is it possible that he's got JTR front speakers and then normal surround speakers, and he's trying to make them all sound equally loud? That could shut down the 60-watt amplifier that's powering the surround speakers. So there's lots of reasons why this could have happened.
Right. The thing to take away from this is never let this guy touch your remote. That's the takeaway. It's like, this man is not allowed to adjust anything in your... he's not allowed to be alone in your home theater.
You can mess up his system all he wants.
Yes. This man clearly, if he thinks it's okay to shut down his receiver, that's just a thing that happens sometimes.
If he was like, hey, this has never happened before, what the heck? Why? I blast my system all the time. Why did it shut down? He's got a stray piece of speaker wire somewhere. That's what that means. In fact, that's probably the most likely reason it shut down.
That's the most likely culprit.
Almost always that.
Yeah. Back when Bertrand was buying all the gear for his theater, we suggested going with an NVIDIA Shield Pro for a streaming player, since he mentioned that he'd like to back up all of his discs using Plex, but he's found that he was really not doing any of that. Welcome to my world. Okay? And welcome to the world that I try. These are the people I write for on AV Gadgets. Sure. They're like, people are like, do I need an AV receiver with pre-outs? I'm like, if you're asking the question, the answer is no. You do not, because you don't even know what they're for, and the only reason you're asking is because somebody on the internet told you it was a good idea. And this is the same thing with Plex. If you really are into this stuff, you don't have to ask whether or not you need an NVIDIA Shield Pro. You're like, what is the best thing? Because I've ripped all these discs and now I need to play them. And then we say NVIDIA Shield Pro, and you say thank you very much, and then you give us $100 on PayPal. But he's found that he's really not doing any of that. He just plays the discs on his Ultra HD Blu-ray player and uses the streaming apps. He's wanted to listen to Atmos music from Apple Music, but discovered that Apple TV app on the Shield doesn't seem to support Atmos music, even though it supports Atmos movies. So he's thinking about replacing the Shield with an Apple TV 4K. But he could just use the apps that are built into his LG CX OLED. Well, there goes your CEC turning off thing that was happening before, if you want this to work. maybe he still uses Plex a little bit, but he heard that the Apple TV 4K isn't the best for Plex, maybe. So, I'm sorry, so he still does use Plex a little bit, but whatever. So what do we say? Would there be any advantage of using the Apple TV 4K over its OLED's built-in apps? Yes, you cannot use your OLED's built-in apps because you have to turn, unless you want to keep getting that control panel thing popping
That's
up.
true. Yeah, you would need HDMI
so
CEC active.
If you want to fix that problem, using the apps is a non-starter. That is done.
All right.
I mean, that is done.
There's
so
also
you cannot use the apps.
The Apple TV app that's built into your LG OLED. It also does not do Atmos music. Not at this time. Maybe it'll get updated to do it at some point, but at this time it does not. And then the other major advantage, and honestly the reason that I personally still like the Apple TV 4K best for streaming, is frame rate matching. That's the major reason I like the Apple TV 4K, is because it actually does frame rate switching and does it correctly, and it seems as though no other device has managed to crack that egg just yet. So that's the major reason I like it. Plus, it'll be the device that'll let you listen to Atmos music from Apple Music services. So as far as it being a Plex player, it does not, from the Plex app for Apple TV 4K, that does not support Dolby True HD or DTS HD master audio. So if you did have a large collection of physical discs that you've backed up, playing those via the Plex app for Apple TV 4K would mean that you don't get the full lossless audio. And that would include the lossless versions of Atmos and DTS-X that you would find on discs. So that's why the NVIDIA Shield is the best Plex playback machine, because it supports all of that inside of Plex. And in the Plex app for the Shield, it does really good frame rate switching. It just doesn't do it for any of the other apps. So that would be the main reasons. If you're really not using, like, you just haven't been backing up discs and you're not using Plex for that, if what you're using Plex for is what's available in Plex, like the streaming that Plex does, its content library, then the Apple TV 4K is absolutely fine for that, because none of that is in True HD or DTS HD master audio. It's really only for discs that you've backed up if you want the full lossless audio. So I think that's that.
Yeah. You get... I hate that control panel more than I
there's that.
like using Plex. So that would be the end of that solution. If you only use Plex a little bit, I mean, I think there's your answer, but that's just me. Mario was happy to read the news that YouTube TV is finally getting 5.1 audio. That sparked a question for him. He's pretty much always used DTS Neural X upmixing, so when his YouTube TV content switches from stereo to 5.1, is he going to hear much of a difference? Why or why not? Yes. Maybe. Probably.
Oh.
Would be my answer.
Really?
So I think so. And the reason is because I feel like when you start getting 5.1 mixes on YouTube, they're going to suck.
Oh, I see. You mean the original what's coming out of there is going to be different.
Yeah, it's not going to be great. So I think that you may find that you like the stereo upmixed more than you like what YouTube is actually putting out. But we don't know.
Yeah, let's imagine that the mastering were not the problem. Let's imagine that the stereo mix and the 5.1 mix are of similarly good quality, and it's just that one has more channels. Now you apply the DTS Neural X upmixer to the stereo version, and then you apply the DTS Neural X upmixer to the 5.1 version. Are you going to notice a big difference?
I would say most of the times no. I would think that you might hear you might notice a little bit. Depends on how far you're upmixing too. If you're doing Atmos and everything else, you might hear a little bit more in the bass or something like that. It might be a little bit
because
more pronounced.
Of that dedicated LFE channel, so that's possible. Yeah.
But I just don't know that you're going to really notice all that much. And it depends on the compression codecs too that they're using as well for the stereo versus the 5.1.
I mean, the stereo is usually uncompressed. So.
Yeah, so, who knows? I mean, I would think that if they were of similar quality, the stereo versus the 5.1, that, people are like, oh my God, 5. Why would you want to use upmixing for your stereo content? I'm like, because it generally sounds pretty good, and it sounds very similar to the actual 5.1 content. They're like, oh yeah, but the volume goes down. I'm like... Yeah, that's true.
Unfortunately, Mario, this is likely a case where there's a high likelihood of hearing a difference and then attributing the reason for that difference to the wrong thing. That is highly likely, because you probably will get scenarios where, like, well, this show always used to be in stereo because YouTube TV was stuck in stereo, and now it's finally supporting 5.1. I listened to 5.1 version. I'm still using an Upmixer either way, and I did hear a difference. It must be because it switched from stereo to 5.1. That's not necessarily the case, because it could be a completely new mix. There could be new codecs involved in this. There could be other reasons why the change was real. You really did hear a difference, but it's not necessarily just because the channel count changed. It could be some other part of the mastering that did it.
No matter where you sit in the world as far as, what's going on around us, the one true thing that you can that anyone who has had Statistics 101 can tell you is that the number one thing that people do is misattribute cause to effect.
Definitely.
They do not know that correlation does not equal causation. They do not understand
or
this
there's
concept
the multiple variables changed, but I only attribute it to the one variable I was thinking of.
Right. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversation, and I had a conversation this morning with this guy who's absolutely convinced that, about that we need to be exposed to more to more colds and stuff because we're losing our immunity. I'm like, I'm not an immunologist, but I'm pretty sure you're wrong. And he's like, well, I went here and I got a cold, and therefore I needed to be exposed to more colds last year. I'm like, I don't know that's how that works, but there's people like to take that N of one, their ability, their own personal experience, and say this happened and then this happened, so they must have caused each other. And that's what happens in audio far too often.
And the multiple variable thing, I always like the golf analogy. I went to my favorite golf course and I scored a 3 over par. Then I went to a different golf course and I wore different golf shoes and I changed my swing and I scored 5 over par. So clearly I'm never going to wear those golf shoes again, because that was what did. That's what did it. Not the different golf course, not the different golf swing. It was the shoes.
Right. Yeah. Jack's Epson 5050 UB has about 1,200 hours on it, and a disturbing problem has arisen. There's a vertical cyan line down on the left side of his image, and it's constantly there. Every input, even the menus. I've got this on one of my LCD.
Yes.
On one of my LCD screens in here. That was after a kid threw a ball in the house and it hit the screen. So we have multiple color lines. So I think you're in for some bad news because it doesn't go away, because I have tried.
Yeah.
So he looked online a little and found other people with similar problems. Some have attempted DIY repairs by cleaning and reseating the tiny ribbon cables inside with varying levels of success. Sending it for repair seems to run about $1,000. And with current part shortages, Jack really does not want to be without a projector for weeks or months. And also end up with spending upwards of $1,000. So do we have any further info? Is there an easier or cheaper fix, or should he be looking at replacing the whole projector? So I think you have, I don't think there is a fix. I would imagine, again, this is one of those things where people are like, I opened it up and I cleaned it and I put it back and then now it's fixed. I don't know that what you think you did, you actually did. You may have done something, but I don't know that you did it on purpose or that anybody else can replicate it, which is why you don't have somebody who's an engineer or who is a technician saying, yes, you are right. By doing this, you have fixed this problem. And people are like, I did the same thing you did, and it's still the same.
Right.
Well, it's because that wasn't the fix. That was a side effect of what they did. So I think that my suggestion to you, and you probably won't love this idea, but my suggestion to you is to send this in for repair, but then order from Amazon or someplace like a super bright LED, one of those small little projectors that everybody's, who doesn't know anything about projectors thinks is the best thing ever, right? And just have it as sort of a backup. I have like a 720p business class projector that I just keep around. And if things go horribly awry here and I have to my projector goes out of service, I have something to watch things on.
Yeah, you're not completely without an image of any kind.
So if it were me, that's what I would do. I would do that. And then if you decide that you're like, oh, we want to have a big game night and I want to have the game projected on the screen outside. Well, you've got this small little projector that you don't care if somebody knocks it off a table. because you didn't spend that much money on it, and it gets bright and the colors aren't accurate, but who cares? You're outside anyways, and you have this sort of backup lying around. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay. I would say Epson, of a lot of the companies, they tend to be a little bit better on the customer support side of things than a lot of other companies are. I am making no promises, but I think it's worth contacting them. Give them a call or email them just to inquire about this, because they have historically been a little bit more helpful than a lot of other companies have been, particularly on their projectors for some reason. They really seem to be quite good on their projectors. So no promises there, but it's free to just get in touch with them and inquire. Because the worst thing they can tell you is you're out of warranty, this is the repair place, and it's going to cost you $1,000 or more. You're already prepared for that, to potentially be the response. So that's the worst they can tell you. And then anything better than that might be better. I have heard about some instances where they're able to get things a little bit more quickly by essentially giving you a swap with a refurbished unit instead of having to wait for the full repair. You still have to pay as though you did the repair, but sometimes they're able to arrange something like that so that you're not without a projector for weeks or months. So it's worth contacting them. I cannot promise anything, but it's free, so why not at least do that?
I agree with that. I think there's no harm in reaching out. All right, who we have left?
Okay, on the list we have Jay, Patrick, Scott, and Gurninder.
Shoot, I forgot to scroll back up to the top. Sorry, I was already ready to press stop.
Not quite.
All right. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your question answered. All you have to do is download my book, Touch of Pain.
Oh, yeah, we didn't answer that at the top of the thing. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Sorry, though.
And then email us at question@avrant.com.
That's what's been on the screen for a while here. Question@avrant.com.
You will have to send in a receipt that says you ordered the book to get your questions.
I'm the one arranging the questions. I'm not looking for that extra bit.
Well, if you want to get to the top of the list, that's how you do it. Buy your way to the top of the list. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Patrick for going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and sending us a PayPal donation, as well as our 146 patrons over at patreon.com, including Dale and Bertrand.
Yes, indeed. Patrick, thank you very much for the PayPal donation. Really do appreciate that. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast is where you can go if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation, and you haven't already done so, because 146 people already have. So a big thank you to them. And Dale and Bertrand, thank you for being two of those people.
We want to thank Chris for sending me a code for Spider-Man No Way Home. Yeah. My family very much thanks you, as well as notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going for Keshaun, Dale, Bertrand, Jack, Joe, and Gurninder.
Indeed, Chris, thank you for supporting Tom in that way, because, yes, wanted to watch that movie, so that was fantastic. Keshaun, Dale, Bertrand, Jack, Joe, and Gurninder, thank you very much for the notes of gratitude and the notes of encouragement. They're definitely appreciated, so a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.